Hello and welcome to another episode of the Broadband Bunch. This is Pete Pizzutillo live from Fiber Connect 2025.
This episode of the Broadband Bunch is sponsored by ETI Software and Vetro FiberMap.
I have the opportunity to speak with Craig Thomas. He's from the Broadband Forum. Craig, thanks for joining us.
Pete, always a pleasure. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's been a while since we had a chance to chat. Looking forward to unpacking what you've been up to and a little bit about what you're seeing in the marketplace. Before we get into that, so you're here at Fiber Connect. Well, what is it that you're coming here to do and what kind of message that you're trying to spread?
Well, first of all, it's one of the biggest fiber events in the world, but North America for the tier 2s and tier 3s, it's the great market. And we have a partnership with FBA that we drive technical workshops for the community, the FBA community. So we're running 4 different technical workshops here at the event, as well as just getting the message out about why standards is important.
Yeah. And why our standards are important. So, let's back up actually. So what's the Broadband Forum's mission? Let's just share that with everybody.
So our mission is basically to build standards, drive interoperability between multi-vendors so it's proven for the service providers. We do a lot of certification programs, write standards, write architectures and software. We have open source software ourselves. And then we have this, why we're here today, we have this role to educate the market. What is the best practices? Are there standards supporting it, whether it's BBF or other standards?
So how is the adoption going? I mean, it's still at the tier 1 level and we're trying to get the kind of the smaller providers going? Is it regionalized? What's your assessment there?
That's a great question. I mean, the tier 1s and the large tier 2s are the ones that have the engineering resources to help write standards, but they're representing the wider community. So tier 2s, tier 3, tier 4 operators, especially in a marketplace that is seeing some consolidation at the moment.
Yeah.
Interoperability of standards is important so that they know that vendor A will work with vendor B, whether it's inside their own network or it may be an M&A target. So standards becomes more and more important, actually, the lower you get down the stack.
Yeah. So I've been in the space for about 6 years now, and there's been an interesting shift from boxes to data. And some major vendors have made that transformation. And I think that's the right way to go, but I still feel like people don't understand the importance of data.
So I think there's so many angles to this. It's, where do you start? I mean, first and foremost, we've been in industry, it's about connection and speed.
Right.
And very quickly, a lot of operators are realizing I can't just keep selling at that utility model. I've got to add services. I've got to recognize what my users are using it for. And data becomes really, really important there.
Yeah.
The more data I have, the more intelligence I have that I can design the service specifically to a subscriber. And there could be multiple subscribers behind the connection. So that's critical. And then you look at the data points that gives me intelligence to tell me, when do I need to build my network? When do I need to upgrade my network? How do I look at things like traditional models of hardware versus virtualizing some operations inside the network? That means I can be much more agile and meet the network requirements that way.
And we're going to dig into this a little bit right now. And I think it's really interesting that everyone's talking about AI, right? But you can't leverage AI without the data, right? I mean, so do you think that's going to move the needle?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, AI is like buzzword, like cloud was a minute ago. And, without the data points, AI is as intelligent as your own network management system today. If I can improve my data points, whether it's inside my network or collective data lakes and big data environments, I can start planning not just for tomorrow, but 6 months, 12 months, 2 years in advance. So I need to be able to look at the data points inside my network and hopefully get to a position where I can share that data anonymously, and I said it right, with other operators as well. So I can start using AI, ML with the right data that isn't just inside my own network.
So I think we agree on that. The question is, how mature does an organization need to be, right? So this conference is pretty heavily on the lower end of the spectrum, and you have people anywhere from startups to brownfields that are, 20,000 subscribers, maybe up to 100,000. We're not talking millions of subscribers. So AI can be an enabler for them, but there's some massive digital transformation that needs to happen.
100% that it needs to. And first and foremost, they have to define what AI means to them. Because, we have Gen AI, we have analytical AI, we have network planning AI. They are all AI, but they're pretty damn separate.
Right.
So, and then I've got my partners, whether it may be consultants, maybe my vendor community, that can help me digest that AI information and what it means to me personally.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I'm AT&T, the depth of data that I need is probably different to a brand new municipal network that's only just being built.
Right.
But I can still take that data points from a bigger picture and make it applicable to me where it makes sense.
And I think that's interesting. Personalization, differentiation is important there. But one of the themes that we talk a lot about with our customers is around reducing operation OpEx, right? So part of what I think it's hard to illustrate is how significant data silos are preventing, being able to automate, but B, also get the right information to the right people at the right time.
Data's precious. And even inside organizations, I want to keep that data to myself and not share it elsewhere.
Right.
Where if you're looking at network planning side of AI, it has to be from the subscriber to the data core.
Right.
Whether that's your own data center or a peering point elsewhere. And I've got to be building that into a virtual environment. And this is where you get things like the virtual, Metro Edge compute, virtualized BNGs and distributed OLTs and BNGs, etc., that I can plan that network. Well, I don't need to necessarily put new hardware in, but I've got to recognize that from a SDN environment or an AI/ML environment, that I can plan this. And we're doing even work inside the BBF on something called subscriber session steering.
Okay.
Which basically says, okay, there's this path to this service management plane, a BNG, for example. But is it the best path? Can I dynamically move that to somewhere else in the network? And AI and ML and the data points is critical to do that. And where you're going to get to is not just service on demand, but quality on demand.
Yes.
That I recognize that this gamer is best served by this part of the network. And I'll switch that on with AI/ML automatically more than just QoE based on the device,
right?
But being the CPU.
Yeah. So you talked about the cloud as kind of the buzzword before, but they were really good at load balancing and the dynamic, the elasticity of demand. Same kind of principle, right? Like, hey, I have this big surge. It's Super Bowl weekend or whatever. And we hear a lot of the medium-sized operators saying, I would like the ability to have the homeowner have that kind of control. But here, if you really got your data together, you can have an agent that's actually dynamically changing the bandwidth and the...
Bandwidth's not the problem.
Okay.
When you're looking at the service, whether it's in the core network, yes, I need to make sure that I've got the right experience and quality to that BNG or to that data center or whatever. But generally speaking, bandwidth isn't the issue. It's traffic management.
Okay.
And then, if you're looking at paying extra for a service, maybe it's gaming, maybe it's security home working, maybe it's e-health, all of a sudden you're ill and you need an e-health service. I need to make sure that the right quality for the right application is going across the right path, wherever that may be in the network. And I want to distribute that intelligence. So I might have pipes that are, terabit sizes, but if the latency is poor, it's still a rubbish service.
Right. So there used to be a lot more talk about in-home services, value-added services. You mentioned a few there. What's the conversations happening right now with what's happening in innovation inside the home?
It's a dynamic time now, I think, that we're seeing some service providers are moving to from a firmware model to a containerized model pretty quickly. And there's some open source software out there, Purple Foundation, RDKB, that are building those stacks for a containerized model. What that basically means is that I can be first to win, but also first to lose. I don't have to wait for a firmware upgrade to make it happen.
Right.
And sometimes it's more important to be the first to lose than the first to win. So we're building that up with USP, which is our home device management, not just to the CPE, the service provider, but to the devices behind that. So all your IoT, home security devices, whatever they may be.
Yeah.
So you can manage those as a service provider. And then TR181, which is our data management plane, which gives all the intelligence so that I can learn from an AI, but also from a plain data model perspective, what my subscribers are using it for at layer 2
Right.
or above. And, you see the fight for the home, whether I'm Amazon, Google, or whatever.
Right.
There's been arguments in our industry that the service provider needs to be the technology provider. I kind of disagree. I think they have an opportunity to be the trusted provider and say, you can rely on us to deliver it, and we only touch you at layer 2 or 2.5. We're never going to be intrusive, but we'll deliver the service for you.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's some industry voices that talk about becoming a dumb pipe, and protecting yourself against those things. But and I think it's a good point, but to your point, you need to decide what's that relationship with my customer and where do I want to be, I do think as the baby boomer generation is evolving into nursing homes, hopefully. I love my parents, but it's time. There's a lot more savvy folks, right? So you're not really trying to handle those types of support calls anymore. It's you can make some advanced moves,
For sure. And I was in a great session earlier, actually on Sunday, which was basically saying the gamer is just 25% of my subscriber base. But they're probably the biggest influencer to everyone, even if there isn't a gamer inside the home. And those guys understand what broadband is and what the services are, and they're influencing, or he or she is influencing all of their community on what's right.
Yeah. That's funny because we talk about that, like the biggest movers in the marketplace are gamers. Like telehealth has way more emotional and moral benefit, but the gaming community, innovation chases returns really, and I think I'm not sure what that says about our society, but I'm not a gamer, so I won't go there.
I'm not a gamer, but they understand technology.
Yeah.
And they are the free in-house technology advisors to people who don't.
Yeah.
So, to ignore them at your peril.
That's right. Just switching topics. We talked a little bit about AI already. Open access, right? So been a long-standing conversation about what it means, and the European models were always kind of the fingerprints of we're trying to pull elements of those things there. What are the conversations now happening around open access with you guys?
So we're lucky to have some of the largest open access providers as members of the Broadband Forum, and they're coming to us and saying, standards-wise, you haven't touched us for a long time. And when you look at an open access model, the European, but don't forget places like Australia, New Zealand, South Africa have been doing it for a long time as well. The model was pretty much migrated from DSL regulated services to fiber. And it's like, okay. The problem with that is they're telling us there's 3 things that they want to solve. First and foremost, security. It's a big issue, especially for any regulated service provider. They've got to make sure the network is secure at every peering point. And with open access, you're adding peering points to your network.
Right.
So we've got to solve the security problem. We've got to solve the visibility, because an open access provider wants to have assurance that they're providing the right service to the end user. The ISP wants to make sure at the layer 3 side that they're offering it. And they want to eliminate the finger pointing of, no, it's in your network. No, it's in your network.
Right.
So the visibility of that is important. And then ultimately, looking at the ISP side, there's a need for the ability to differentiate better.
Right.
If I'm one of 200, there's 200 ISPs buying this open access, we're all selling the same 4 services.
Yeah.
Well, the only way I can differentiate is on price or customer service.
Right.
So I need better ways to differentiate.
So how is standards going to help those? Like, so start with security.
For security point of view, it's not just owned by the BBF, but we've got to make sure that at the IPv4 and IPv6, and we're starting the work on the IPv6, that every peering point has its own security measures and best practices, so that we can secure the network and then give the ISP the tools to secure the subscriber.
Gotcha. Yeah.
There's been some horror stories recently about some service providers that have been cyber attacked themselves, not the end user, but the network itself. And it's brought the network down. We need to solve that. So we're starting that work, firstly on the IPv6 level, and we've got some work ongoing there. So that's security. On the visibility side, we're working on moving up the stack. We have something called UDP speed test.
Okay.
Because basically traditional IP speed tests sort of flaked out at 500 megabits.
Yeah.
So now we're doing UDP, and now we're being able to split that into a wholesale provider view, which stops not at the ONT network termination, but at the Wi-Fi edge type product. So it's still layer 2, and I'm only seeing my layer 2 as an open access provider. And then the layer 3 and up the stack from a UDP level, the ISP can do that, and we can segment those speed tests.
Yeah.
So that's exciting work that started.
Right.
So that's great. And then differentiation. Well, Bitstream is layer 2, and that's pretty much the model that you're seeing in Europe. We have IP Stream that never really took off, which was layer 3 and above. But we've also got something called FANS. That's work that we actually completed 4 or 5 years ago, fixed access network sharing.
Okay.
Where we can take the layer 2 and to layer 3 and slice segments of the network. So each operator, whether I'm each ISP who's a customer to the open access provider, can have his own slice and manage within that slice all the differentiated services he wants to. So that's a FANS, fixed access network sharing. It's a bit of a tongue twister.
Well, thank you for that. Coming back to AI, what's your recommendation to folks right now to kind of start? I think you started, like, what does it mean to you, and how does it fit into your plans? But that plus I'm looking at how to help people build enterprise value, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I do think you mentioned a couple things, having standards and interoperability for both acquiring or getting merged networks. I mean, there's enterprise value in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how, what's your advice there?
Well, I think you need to have clear definition of what is your goal from AI, and recognizing that, you look at the tier 1 operators and they're talking about autonomous networking and moving to, the ability of a self-learning network and moving out of the closed loop. Well, that's only as good as the data.
Right.
But then you look at tier 2s and tier 3s, and it's more about, I need AI to build me the data models that I know exactly what my future silos, but also network-wide capacity is and how I need to start building my network. They're not going to be moving to autonomous tomorrow.
Right.
So be very clear, and then also be very clear on how I can share the data inside my network anonymously with others, so that I'm getting a bigger picture that my segment in time is similar to the segment in times in other operators, and now I can plan further ahead. The more data I've got, the better usage it is. So
we've seen mid-sized operators investing in data lakes, developers to try to pull all that, to kind of be that, in lieu of going to standards, right? We'll figure it out on the back end. It's essentially been the approach.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see AI helping to displace that, or is there going to be a parallel effort?
There has to be a parallel effort. It's similar to standards and open source software, that we both want to use these AI models. I'm going to be rude to every legal company and council in the world, but one of the biggest barriers is legal, to say what you can share and what you cannot share outside of your company.
Right.
If we can recognize a model where we can build the right demographics, the right regionalization of data, and then open it up as a big data or data lake environment that others can use, whilst restricting, of course, the precious data and security issues that you may have, then that's cool. And I think one of the biggest things that I would love to do is get the legal community of each one of these service providers back in the room and say, here's your CTO, here's your legal representative. CTO, what do you need?
Yeah.
Legal guy, what are you prepared to give?
Right.
And if we can have that open and honest discussion, we would move a lot quicker.
But are the legal folks just working within the bounds of legislation? I mean, does the government have a role in helping us?
There's part of that, and there's conservatism as well.
Okay.
Regulations differ from one country to the next.
Right.
And that makes it hard, because, if I'm in Germany, I'd love to know what the models are like in America, but I've got 2 different regulators there.
Yeah.
How do I get that? Well, where is there a safe space that I can share without giving away precious information?
And I think what your mission, if I'm a government and I have standards, right? I mean, and it's because it brings transparency and understandability, right? Because their challenge is they got to go and audit thousands, and that's impossible, right? So it's if we can get everybody on board, then you can come to the government and say, this is what's happening, right? And then they're like, okay, it makes it a little bit clearer, right? Because they're just de-risking their decisions, right? And they're just like, well, I don't really understand. You can't do it, know?
And from a service provider point of view, they're naturally going to ask, what's in it for me?
Right.
Because I don't want to give all this data to competitors and suddenly they can use it.
Right.
So if I am sharing data, there's got to be an advantage to me compared to the big, wider marketplace. And I need to have a neutral broker of this. I can't trust just anyone to share this data. And I'm going to put it. So I need a trusted broker somewhere along the line.
Well, I think your open access, that ecosystem is a great example, right? Because you kind of have this trust, implicit trust in that relationship, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm the open access provider and the operators, then if I can find a way to pull all that intelligence to benefit us all, but now you're directly into, I still need to differentiate from that guy, so what is that like? How do you sit down with two operators that are competing and try to unpack that?
So, and there's your quandary.
Yeah.
If it's a direct competitor, I'm much less likely to share anything.
Yeah.
If it's a bigger picture, if I've got a, West Coast view versus an East Coast versus, Western Europe view, then I can use that data. It's not personalized and it's not benefiting my direct competitor. Because if not, why would I share information that's going to benefit the guy that's stealing my business?
Let me ask you this question. We're seeing this little phenomenon now, not a little, but the traditional BSS, OSS, and stovepipe functional software is collapsing, is converging, right? So BSS systems are doing more OSS, right? There's more field service in there. So the data models of each of those is bleeding into the next, right? So that, I think, does two things. One, it makes non-traditional competitors that you have coming into your marketplace, right? But it also may work around because you're basically, we talked about it earlier, in the same organization, the data share between outside plant, inside plant, finance has always been, stitched together, right? But now if you have these kind of horizontal systems, right? So do you see a pattern like that happening?
I do. And when you look at, a move to an orchestration level, where you have a network orchestrator, a service orchestrator, and then all of these domain orchestrators underneath that, well, it's critical that those domain are going into some sort of managed orchestration above it, whether it's network or service level. So I think that will weaken the barriers of some of the silos.
Yep.
And an OSS and BSS, as you say, is blurring lines anyway.
Yeah.
And ultimately, whether you are a single vendor or black box vendor which has its own OSS, BSS, or you're looking at a standardized approach where I may be virtualizing or distributing some functions, and therefore I need that orchestration level, that's the way to completely ruin those silo barriers.
Right.
And I personally believe that's the future.
I agree. I think we're going to kind of attack it from both angles, right? And just the technology, software companies are self-funded, right? And so they're kind of reinventing, and we're seeing it now anyway. I mean, even into network monitoring and in the, NMS systems, they're all beginning pretty blurry. So I mean, it's encouraging. It's an interesting time. There's definitely more to unpack there. Where's your next stop? Where are you heading after this?
Well, luckily, our next stop is actually Munich. We have our summer member meeting, and we also have our own summit ourselves.
Very nice.
Where we dive down into the technology and everything. So that's exciting. End of June.
Okay.
Any service provider, free of charge if you want to come.
All right. Munich's a beautiful place. So
especially in June in the beer kellers.
Yeah. It's better than October. I can't hang with those guys.
It's too busy then.
Yeah, exactly. Where can our listeners learn more about you and the work you guys are doing?
If you want to get involved with us, just reach out, info@broadband-forum.org, and we can just tell you everything that you need to know and try to encourage you to contribute to Standard.
That's right. And you're always around, and it's great to catch up. And thanks for all the good work you guys are doing. Looking forward to seeing us move the needle finally.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good rest of your show.
Cheers. Bye.